Phil, great to have you back with us again. How are you, man?
Well, I am doing great, Matt, and I imagine you have to be doing pretty well with LSU being in the national title game in New Orleans. That's got to be pretty great for anybody who's an LSU fan.
Phil, I have said my go-to line has been anybody in this state that is complaining, you're just damn greedy, because the getting has been good this year. We're hoping that the game lives up to the hype on Monday. Let's just go deep dive, full breakdown LSU Clemson, and let's start with the marquee matchups of the quarterbacks. Burrow, Lawrence, how do you see that shaking out? Where do you see the edge?
I don't give an edge to the quarterback. I think when you take a look at these two, Joe Burrow's had the better season. No ifs, ands, or buts. May have one of the greatest seasons of all time in college football. Hasn't had a bad game all year, and has elevated himself from being probably a third-round draft pick all the way up to the top pick in the draft. But Trevor Lawrence has played pretty well in these postseason games. Shredded Alabama last year. And since that early start where he was throwing too many interceptions and probably trying to do too much, he's got a 21-0 ratio the last 7 games. And you have to stand up and pay attention to the fact he outran the Ohio State secondary for a long touchdown run in the last game. I think if the NFL scouts are picking, they would take Trevor Lawrence. If you base it on this year's stats, you take Joe Burrow. I'm rating the quarterbacks dead even.
What about all season long, Phil? We've had this conversation about the LSU offense. You mentioned Burrow hasn't had a bad game when they've gone against sort of elite defenses. And first it was, well, here comes Florida with their edge pressure, and they aced that test. And then it was Auburn and Bama and Georgia and so on. And LSU just keeps on churning. So how does LSU fare against this or match up against this elite Clemson defense?
I'm going to say pretty doggone good. You know, and Clemson comes in number 1 ranked in the ratings, holding opponents to 152 yards per game below their season average. That's the best mark in the country. And they're known for, Venables is known for his blitzing. But I tell you what, Joe Burrow has proven over and over, if you blitz this guy, he's going to burn you. And as you mentioned, they have not been slowed down by anybody all year. The only game they did not top 500 yards of offense was Mississippi State, and that was not an A-game performance. It was not one where, you know, they're coming off the big win against Florida, and they had Auburn on deck. It was definitely a sandwich game for that situation. But every other game, he's beaten some pretty doggone good defenses. So I see Clemson's defense as being one of the tougher ones he's faced this year, but I don't think they can stop Joe Burrow. I like Joe Burrow to have a good game.
So when you flip the field and you talk about that Clemson defense, how have they fared this year against elite offenses, or have they even faced a truly elite offense this year, Phil?
Probably the only one I look at is Ohio State. Ohio State got them for 516 yards and 28 first downs, threw for 320 yards on them. And the previous week, you know, I was pretty bullish on the Clemson defense, and then against Virginia, they played Bryce Perkins. And Virginia put up 23 first downs in that game. They had some red zone difficulties, ended up getting blown out 62-17. But I was sort of shocked the way Virginia moved the football, almost 400 yards with a pretty one-dimensional offense. Their offense is Bryce Perkins. They don't have the receivers that LSU does. They don't have the running backs that LSU does. They had a mobile quarterback. So I think when you look at those final 2 games, I've sort of been unimpressed with Clemson's defense these last 2 games.
And so Phil Steele's our guest. So Phil, it sounds like what you're saying has sort of been the consensus. LSU is going to move the ball. They're going to score points. So the question is, if you flip the field, can Clemson do the same against an LSU defense, which has been playing better over the last month?
Yeah, the last 4 weeks have been great for LSU, holding opponents to 163 yards per game below their season average, 270 yards per game. But I still can't get those 4 big games out of my head. There was 4 games where they allowed over 450 yards. Texas, Florida, Alabama, and Ole Miss. And a mobile quarterback got him in the Ole Miss game. Of course, that was, once again, a sandwich situation coming off the big Alabama game. But overall, in those 4 games, they allowed over 500 yards. And when you look at Clemson, they don't have LSU's offensive line, but they've got a very good offensive line. They've got ETN at running back. They've got Trevor Lawrence throwing to T. Higgins and Justin Ross, who I think have a size advantage at the receiver position. It's just a dangerous Clemson offense that I think is going to do some damage against that LSU defense. I'm looking for a high-scoring game here, Matt.
Sounds like it. What if it comes down to a kick or field position? We've talked so much about the quarterbacks, about the offenses and defenses. What about special teams? Do you give an edge there?
I do. In my power ratings, they have LSU as the top 20 special teams, and Clemson just middle of the road. So I'm going to give LSU the special teams edge.
If it comes down to a kick, how would you feel if Clemson had to trot out there for a game-winning kick?
They haven't really had that many problems at kicker this year so far. So I think both kickers come into the game fairly good. But once again, Clemson hasn't faced the type of pressure this year that LSU has faced. LSU has faced pressure on a weekly basis.
Yeah. What about intangibles, Phil? There's so many that people discuss in a game like this, if it's the experience in the game or even the venue, just LSU playing a de facto home game.
Yeah, well, the venue clearly favors LSU. It is a home game for them, and that's going to be big, big news for them. But I think the other intangibles sway to Clemson. I mean, when you look at Clemson, they've won 29 straight games, so it's been a long time since they suffered a loss. And the big one to me, and it goes back to is how Dabo Swinney does as an underdog in the postseason. How about 8-1 against the spread as a dog, and he's won 6 of those outright. And I know because I've gone against Dabo Swinney in at least 4 of those games and wondered at the end, why did I do that? Why did I go against Dabo again? And he beat me again. So it's been one of those things where I think intangible-wise, Clemson's loving the fact that everybody in the country is picking LSU to win this game. They're the underdog, and I think that's a great advantage for Clemson to have.
All right, Phil Steele is with us, philsteele.com. That's STEELE, philsteele.com. You go take the Phil Steele Plus tour. All right, Phil, let's get down to how this thing plays out. It sounds like, I know that LSU's favored 5.5, 6 some places, totals around 69.5. How do you see this game? A lot of points, it sounds like. Which way does it go?
Yeah, I like my favorite play here, Matt, is the over. Once again, going back to the fact that Dabo's beat me so many times in the postseason as an underdog. I look at these two teams, and I think the last team with the ball probably wins the game. You know, the interesting thing is had this game been played prior to the semifinal matchups, the game probably would have been pick 'em. But after Clemson struggled against Ohio State and LSU blew out Oklahoma, that's why the number's so high. And all the action in the country is on LSU. But I just find it tough to go against Dabo in that situation. I do think LSU is the more talented team, probably wins with the home field situation. But can you lay that many points in the game is the big question. So to me, my favorite play is probably the over. I think we're going to see a lot of points on the board, and I'm looking for a high-scoring game.
He is Phil Steele on Twitter at PhilSteele042, PhilSteele.com, where you go take the Phil Steele Plus tour. Remind him again, Phil, because obviously NFL playoffs are still in full swing.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Matt. Last week put up a couple of playoff games. They both won. You can get playoff games. Even got the FCS game up there for you on the Phil Steele Plus tour. It's available right now. Just go to PhilSteele.com, and right on the front, it's a YouTube video. You click on it and get all the information on the FCS championship game, NFL playoffs, and more. I break down all the bowls, let you know misleading finals from the bowls and things like that. So check it out right now at PhilSteele.com.
He's been with us all season long, and we appreciate it. One game to go. It's LSU and Clemson Monday in New Orleans for the national championship. Make sure you follow Phil on Twitter and check out PhilSteele.com and take the Phil Steele Plus tour. Phil, it's, as always, man, second season in a row. It's been our pleasure to chat on these Fridays, man. We appreciate you.
Make sure you enjoy yourself in New Orleans there, Matt. I have a feeling you're going to.
I'll see what I can do, Phil. You enjoy the game as well.
All right, thanks, Matt. Great talking to you again, my friend.
That is Phil Steele. We appreciate him for joining us. So Phil likes a lot of points, likes the Tigers, as does pretty much everybody that we've talked to so far. As he mentioned there, money is 8-1 on LSU. It has been heavy LSU action, which I'm surprised we haven't seen that spread rise a little more, considering how much liability Vegas has if LSU wins and covers. It would be crushing to Las Vegas, if to the sports books, really, not just Vegas, Mississippi and online, if LSU ends up winning this game and covering. All right, it's after further review. We will go around the SEC when we come back. Terrio in 32 minutes. He told me today. So Terrio has had the one bit he's done all season is he has basically crushed the opposing city whoever LSU was playing. Started it with Austin when LSU went and played in Texas, and then he just carried it. It became popular. He carried it on. He called me earlier today and said he was actually like doing something special, like deep dive prepping for today. So I think Clemson, South Carolina might want to watch out. Terrio might be like carpet bombing Clemson, figuratively speaking, of course. Maybe crop dusting them with gas because he makes fart jokes.